Here's a little secret. People don't watch the NCAA tournament to see the Blue Bloods win. Unless their parents were able to pony up the $500K and fake rowing documents to get them into those schools, they watch to see teams like Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, and UNC get upset. And to do that, it takes a Cinderella. And Cindy's can come from anywhere. The Colonial Athletic Association, the Missouri Valley Conference, hell, sometimes even the SEC. What matters is that they rise to the occasion to topple a giant when the odds and seeding are against them. And today we're going to look at the most unlikely Cinderellas to show up at the ball, and that's coming up right after this. Fellas, it's finally March, and do you know what that means? It means spring break is just around the corner, and if you plan on getting anywhere near some thotties in the nice weather that's coming up, you better have things in order. And I'm not talking about travel arrangements, I'm talking about the jungle you've allowed to grow down there. And that's where MANSCAPED comes in. It's not spring break 2019, welcome to SPRINGSCAPED. At SPRINGSCAPED, you need yourself a clipper that was designed by aerospace engineers to clear the landing area for the ladies who would otherwise be outright horrified by what you've allowed to happen down there. The Lawnmower 2.0 slices through your jungle foliage like there is no tomorrow, just like spring break. And you know what they say, when you trim down the bushes, the tree looks bigger. And let's not forget about all the gear you can get in the perfect package. The plow for difficult hair, crop preserver, crop cleanser, crop reviver, grooming tools, and everyone's favorite, crop mop, wipes for your balls. 10 out of 10 would recommend. So before you book your flight to Cancun, or if you just want to be respectful to the ladies this spring, awkwardly run over to manscaped.com from the link below. Type in my code POINT20 and get 20% off your order. Again, that's code POINT20 for 20% off your first order. Get ready for SPRINGSCAPED 19 in style. And if you act now, we'll throw in the shed travel bag for free. Manscaped.com, #1 in below the waist grooming. Even though we're all coughing from the amount of chalk dust floating around during this year's NCAA tournament, there's no better moment than now to celebrate the teams that lit up the bracket with a red marker. Unlike the prophecy foretold, not all Cinderellas are created equally. Some snuck by their opponents by the slightest of margins, and some beat their wicked stepsisters over the head with a glass slipper and said, "I'm staying out till 4 a.m., bitch." For the 2013 Wichita State squad, the Shockers was an apt nickname for a team that rose out of the Missouri Valley Conference to take down a few big boys on their way to the Final Four. Armed with a freshman backcourt that included future NBA players Fred VanVleet and Ron Baker, Wichita State racked up a 26-8 record that allowed them to enter the tournament as a 9 seed. And ready to shock, they were.
Lightning bolt! Lightning bolt!
Wichita State took out the number 20 Pitt Panthers in the 9-8 matchup, besting them by an impressive 18-point margin and proving that this small conference team wasn't going to lie down to anybody. Next up, Wichita State was matched up with the 1 seed Gonzaga Bulldogs. Despite 26 points from human injury dispenser Kelly Olynyk, Wichita was able to stay ahead, shooting 50% from three-point land, and came away with a 6-point victory on the strength of their 14 made three-pointers. In the Sweet 16, Wichita State out-Cinderella 13 seed LaSalle by a score of 72-58, which prompted an Elite 8 showdown with Ohio State, the 7th best team in the country. The Shockers got 14-7-3 from guard Malcolm Armstead, and steady contributions across the board against the Buckeye squad that got the majority of its scoring from just 2 players. Wichita State out-rebounded their Big Ten counterparts and shot 40% from behind the arc, while Ohio State hit just 1 out of every 5 attempts from deep. In the end, Wichita State prevailed by a score of 70-66 and sent the Ohio State back to the couch for the rest of the tournament. Unfortunately, like the rest of the teams on this list, the clock eventually struck midnight. Wichita State's electric run ran out of sparks as Louisville finally edged them out by 4 points to make sure the Shockers' exit would be premature. And yep, that's a Patino joke. When the underdog wins, you expect by the smallest of margins. That wasn't the case for Virginia Commonwealth University in 2011. Shaka Smart's team entered the tournament as an 11th seed and promptly tipped off their improbable run by laying a 13-point beating on USC in the first four, an 18-point win over Georgetown, and another 18-point margin to cruise by number 12 Purdue. Then they faced a real test in the Sweet 16. The Rams went toe-to-toe with the ACC powerhouse FSU until overtime, when VCU's Bradford Burgess laid in the game-winning bucket with 7 ticks left and won on a block shot at the buzzer. On to the Elite Eight. The long shot Rams were paired with number 1 Kansas, a team that went 35-3 and featured future NBA stalwarts Marcus and Markieff Morris. Not a problem for VCU. Their forward Jamie Skeen poured in 26 points to go with 10 boards and a couple steals to pace the Rams as they not only upset a blue blood, but took care of them by a gap of 10 points. Unfortunately, in the Final Four, VCU ran into the buzzsaw that was Shelvin Mack and Brad Stevens and lost 70-62. While 8th-seeded Butler returned to the final round for the second straight year. VCU couldn't finish off the run, but their casual beatdowns of higher-seeded teams earns them a spot in tournament history. From one Virginia school to another, former VCU rival George Mason University of the CAA charged their way from a 23-win regular season into the Final Four at the end of the 2006 season. Behind head coach Jim Larinaga, the George Mason Patriots were an at-large entry into the tourney that was roundly criticized as they made it in as an 11th seed. Regardless, the Pats shut up all the naysayers in the first round with a victory over the 6th seed Michigan State Spartans and then climbed out of a 16-2 hole against North Carolina, coming back to win 65-60 in the round of 32. Then a Sweet 16 date with Wichita State. 4 George Mason starters scored in the double figures, and the Shockers were stunned, held to just 3 of 24 behind the arc as the Patriots advanced with an 8-point win. Fans were treated to a classic in the Elite Eight as George Mason stood up to the heavy favorite, the UConn Huskies. Mason's Jai Lewis poured in 20 points as the Pats forced overtime. George Mason held UConn star Rudy Gay scoreless and held on as the Huskies missed the potential game-winning 3 at the buzzer. Of course, that would be it for George Mason as they fell in the Final Four to the eventual champs, the stacked Florida Gators. But Mason defied expectations and did the one thing we thought was impossible: make us root for a team called the Patriots. If you have God on your side, who could possibly be against you, right, Ray Lewis? In the case of Loyola Chicago, not only was God in their corner, but so was 98-year-old Sister Jean Dolores Schmidt, the team chaplain. The Ramblers, an 11th seed in the 2018 tournament, took on Miami in the opening round and won a nail-biter, 64-62. It turns out that would be the theme of their improbable march to the Final Four. Next up, they had the physically imposing Tennessee Volunteers. Sister Jean told the team, "Don't let those Tennessee team members scare you with their height," she said. "Height doesn't mean that much. You're good jumpers. You're good rebounders. You're good at everything. And just keep that in mind. Ooh, I'm so old." Well, the team heeded her advice and walked away with another tight victory after holding their star Admiral Schofield to just 14 points and out-rebounding the bigger Tennessee Vols. Loyola's Clayton Custer hit a J with 5 seconds left, vaulting the Ramblers to a 63-62 win. Just a few days later, the God Squad did the same thing to number 24 Nevada, edging out the Wolfpack in another barn burner. Marcus Towns and Clayton Custer combined for 33, and again, Loyola escaped with a 1-point win over the Barking Dogs from the biggest little city. The Ramblers were paired with Kansas State in the Elite Eight, and this time, Loyola came out swinging from the start and never allowed K-State to catch up. Guard Ben Richardson had a game-high 23 points, and the rest of the team hit 50% of their threes as they rambled on to a 16-point win over the once again favored Kansas State Wildcats. Unfortunately, Moritz Wagner and the Michigan Wolverines ended Loyola's holy crusade to the championship, but the Ramblers' Cinderella run proved that it really is possible to have the clutch gene. Ugh.
What do you know from funny, you bastard?
A few years before they would be able to feature the post-human rim wrecker that was and still is Shaquille O'Neal, LSU was a mid-level SEC team that had fallen on unbelievably bad luck. After their best player Jerry Reynolds left early for the NBA, their team was decimated by bizarre misfortune. 6'11" Damon Vance was declared academically ineligible. 7'1" forward and father of Al, Tito Horford, left the team or was dismissed, and 7' Zoran Jovanovic suffered a season-ending knee injury. Then later, Nikita Wilson failed a couple of classes that left him ineligible for spring, and the team was hit with a rash of chickenpox that rendered them barely able to field a unit. Football players were called over to the basketball team. Guards were playing centers. Games were rescheduled. Cats and dogs were living together. And yet, the LSU Tigers managed to pull off an unlikely sprint towards the Final Four after finding a way to finish the regular season with a 22-11 record. As an 11 seed, LSU faced off with the Purdue Boilermakers in the first round. The Tigers had 3 starters score 20 points or more and forced double overtime with Purdue. In the first OT, both teams scored just 4 points each. In the second, LSU scored 21, enough to walk away with a 7-point victory. By the way, if you're noticing a trend with the 11 seeds making deep runs, that's because as an 11 seed, you're not set up to play a 1 seed until at least the Elite 8, whereas a 9 seed might have to play a 1 seed in the second round. It's math. After knocking off Purdue, LSU beat 3 seed Memphis by a score of 83-81. And then dispatched number 2 seed Georgia State by a 6-point margin, setting up a date in the Elite 8 with a 1-seeded Kentucky. By the time 40 minutes of toe-to-toe basketball was winding down, sophomore Ricky Blanton hit a layup to give the Tigers a 59-57 lead that held up, giving LSU the Elite 8 win and the ability to say they had beat the 1, 2, and 3 seed in their region. LSU's magical run came to an end in the Final Four when they fell to Louisville 88-77, but they had left their mark as a team that was able to overcome the misfortune that turned them into the underdog in the first place. Even though we're used to the same teams advancing in the tournament just about every year, it makes it that much more special when teams like Loyola, George Mason, or VCU can upset the proverbial apple cart that is college basketball. We watch the tournament to see the David sneak up on the Goliaths, and every few years when an underdog does go on a run, it makes all the Duke blowouts and runaway Kentucky wins all worth sitting through. So in the future, when you're wondering why there's all this chalk all over your fingers like a layer of Cheeto dust, just know there's always a Cinderella waiting around the corner waiting to fire her slingshot at— wait, I got my analogies mixed up. You know what I mean. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do not forget to check out manscaped.com and use my code POINT20 for 20% off your first order. And also check out my other videos on March Madness, like the triggering one. I'm 5 Points Vids, and you made it to the end of this video.